Welcome to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast, the show that offers you tips and strategies to help speakers build the business of their dreams. Now here's your host, 30-year industry veteran and business coach, Jane Atkinson.
Well, welcome everyone to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. You know, we have said for years that there is no better form of marketing than a terrific presentation. And today we're going to talk about the art of moving your audience. Our special guest is Sally Zimney. Welcome to the show, Sally Z.
Thank you, Jane. I'm so excited to be here, really, truly.
I live in Canada. Is it Z or Z? I don't even know the right.
Oh, well, I go by Sally Z.
Z. Okay.
But Z is so cool.
I think
and I live in Minnesota, so I'm practically Canadian. I feel
there
like
you go. You're an
I need to play with
honorary,
that. Yeah.
you're an honorary Canuck. So Sally Z, tell everybody about kind of your business model and how you help people.
Wonderful. Yes. Well, I am both a speaker and a speaker coach. I love them both. I've been doing them both really for as long as I can remember. But I also like to think of myself as a bravery expert because ultimately, especially as we talk about moving your audience, that is the key, really how to embody our authentic voice and do it in a way that truly connects with your audience. And it isn't just about sharing everything that you know. So I've got programs for speakers who are trying to develop that audience moving speech and build the business that supports that. And I do lots of one-on-one coaching as well, and lots of speaking about the art of moving your audience and stepping into the brave spotlight, whatever that means for you.
There's something about it when I read it when I was researching you, the idea of moving your audience just kind of struck me in the heart, I think it was. When you've seen a speaker and okay, so I've been in the business for over 30 years. I've seen a speaker or two. Yeah. And not all of them moved me, but the ones that did move me, I still remember 30 years later.
Totally. So let me just ask you, Jane, when you think about the speakers who moved you, what was it about them that moved you?
Well, I'm thinking of Captain Jerry Coffee, and I've spoken about him on the podcast before. Captain Coffee came to an NSA convention that was very red, white, and blue because it was in Washington, D.C. Naomi Rhodey is the president, and it's my first convention. Okay. So I am there as a raw piece of clay, ready to and I bawled through this entire conference. I mean, I do cry naturally at any national anthem or anything like that. I'm Canadian, but I'm patriotic to all of North America, really. And so when Captain Jerry Coffee spoke about being a prisoner of war, and he spoke about how they communicated between their little 4x4 cells to the person next to them. And he talked about they spoke in Morse code. And so he was tapping. There was a piano there because there had been a singer earlier in the night, and he tapped on the piano. And I can still remember how that sounded, tapping out the Morse code that they would speak to each other in. And I mean, there was not a dry eye in the house. Talk about being moved. Now that was like a monumental, for my very first seeing an audience being moved. That was like epic. I mean, even now, I don't know that I have anything that tops it.
Wow. I love that. What an amazing story. So as you're talking about that, I'm imagining in my head, so you sharing the story of him sharing the story, I can see it in my head. And that is really this magical sauce of moving your audience is this communion that happens. Communion's a big, strong word, but I just mean like the metaphysical connection that happens between the speaker and audience. And how do we build that? How do we actually feel like we are sharing this moment together, that we are creating shared meaning? Because you weren't there, and yet you see it in your head, you imagine it, you kind of created the story in your head. And it might not even, like, how you remember it now and how you're sharing it, stories evolve, don't they? They sort of change in through the telling. And as we keep telling and tell more, they tend to evolve because we start to insert our own experiences, what we envision. I like to, as an example, I often talk about, the importance of specificity in your storytelling and how that lights up the brain and brings it alive and helps us feel like we're creating this shared experience.
Okay, give me an example of specificity.
Okay.
I love words. I'm a writer, so I love words, and you just got me all excited there.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Yeah. So I tell the story about, in first grade, I had a huge crush on Matt Rowe. And he will never listen to this podcast. He's a teacher in suburban Wisconsin. He's an amazing person. In first grade, I was like, oh, Matt Rowe, he's so cute. And so because I was a little athlete Sally, I liked to chase Matt on the playground.
Oh.
Yes, right. So I remember just running through those little pebbles in the playground, crunch, 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 running through those pebbles, and Judy, the playground lady's blowing her whistle, Sally, stop running, slow down. And I would stop and say, sorry, Miss Judy. And then as soon as she turned around, I would start running after Matt again, crunch, 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 running through the playground, through the swings, around the slide. And as I tell this story, okay, what do you see in your head? I'm just curious.
And I'm hearing too, I'm hearing the crunching, I'm hearing the whistle. I'm seeing you going in the swings and the slide. Like I can literally imagine you're doing this. So your specificity is allowing me to visualize what it is that you're speaking about. And that is the coolest.
It's truly part of the magic of co-creation, because you're probably imagining your elementary school playground, right? The swings that you got to swing on, and what the scene looks like in your head is going to be probably different than what it was for me. And that's totally okay. That's sort of that's how we pass along the experience and move our audience to bring them into that magical moment. So I love your story, and the reason it comes alive is that specificity. You even remember what it sounded like on the piano.
Had I done the knocking, there's something about sound that, I don't know, there's an experiential thing about sound. And so that's an interesting, okay.
Well, it turns it into musical, it's this musical element where it's not just dependent on the words that we're saying, but we're really thinking about the experience that you're creating.
Yeah, so cool. Okay, so we want to break it down into kind of 3 chunks for everybody today. We've got the moving message. We've got story first, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, and structure. So let's start with moving message. What say you about that?
Well, the moving message, and I know you talk about this too a lot, Jane, is I see it as this beautiful Venn diagram of 3 different circles coming together. We have you, who you are, the special distinctions that make you, you, the stories, the experiences, how you use your body, like how you hold space, all of the things that make you, you. And the second circle is your audience, who you're talking to, who they are, what they need, what they are going through, how they show up in the world. And we sort of put those first 2 circles together and say, okay, how do you in particular, how do you serve that particular audience? Okay? And that in and of itself is a really important, powerful question to ask. And every time I do this with my speakers, even if they've done it before, it changes. We tend to just dig a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper as you get to know your audience and you get feedback as you're out there speaking and they're saying to you, like you're hearing their stories. It's an empathy exercise. And importantly, it's not just understanding your audience, but what is the thing about you that is so particular to you that can serve that audience in this way? And
Yes.
then the third circle, which is really important, is what's happening now. What is it about the world right now that changes and affects and really creates a slightly different dynamic than just those first two circles together? Because you might speak to an education audience and you know that audience really well. Well, the needs of now, that third circle is going to look really different in 2024 than it did in 2020 and than it did in even 2023. So we're always have to, that third circle is really, really important to make sure that we are, when we show up there, when we are embodying this message, we can be truly present
Mm.
with the people so that we can create that shared meaning and understanding together.
I love it. And I love that you started from a place of service. If
Mm.
if this isn't already in your DNA, remember that it's not about you.
Yeah.
You're there to serve. And
Mhm.
I think that when we remember that, I did a post the other day about on Facebook about Madonna getting sued for
Mm.
starting 2 hours late. And I really do think that that generation of diva like
Yeah.
behaviors is very different from the new generation. Like, I don't think Taylor Swift would ever do that. I am
Mhm.
such a big Taylor Swift
Yeah.
fan. So I really
Me
study
too.
her business and her,
Yeah.
uh it's just very interesting to me. And I
Yeah.
think her Swifties would call her on it as well. Like,
Yeah.
come on, where the heck are you? And this
Yeah.
diva like behavior would only happen once.
Yeah.
And then she would take it in and it wouldn't happen again. And so people are saying, yeah, well, if you were, this kind of level of fame, you could do whatever you want. You could write your own rules. Well, I
Mhm.
think that Madonna has forgotten who it's about.
Yeah.
And it's not about her and her divadom. And if I personally would not wait 2 hours.
It's super interesting. And I think you're right. There is probably some generational differences there. But I
Mhm.
find too, the speakers, especially if you're emerging, if you're new to this, we tend to feel this push and pull. Like we need enough ego to say, I have something to say. I
Ah,
belong on stage. I know I can have a powerful impact to people. And yet not so much ego that we forget that honestly we're the vessel.
the
We're
vessel,
there
yes.
truly in service to them. And if we cannot get out of our own way and be present with people, they're going to leave. They're not going to wait 2 hours. They don't care.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And yeah, I think that I don't know why I brought that up, but I just think
Oh
that
yeah.
it's really important to come from a place of service, no matter how big and famous you get.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
You
the
can
really
feel it. Your audience can feel it when you are really truly there for them, or you're just
for
getting
them.
up there doing their thing. It's your show, and then you're leaving.
Yeah, and especially for someone who's trying to remain relevant.
Yeah.
So sorry, missed the
Yeah.
boat. Okay. So we've got we've talked about your moving message. Is there anything else before we move on to story first?
No, I think we covered that well.
Okay, on to story first. Talk about that.
Yeah. So we started this podcast talking about stories because they're so, and we know this, sticky, they're important. And we've been talking about stories forever. Like stories are important. We all need stories.
Yes.
Well, what I have learned over the years, and I actually got my master's in persuasion and studied stories, studied the magical power of stories, that it's not just about inserting some stories to break up all of your expertise, insights, and advice, but they play a really powerful role in helping people take abstract ideas and make them personal and meaningful, to give the concept that you care so much about, this message you care so much about, to give it legs, a beating heart, an experience that resonates and relates. And so we know stories are important. One of the things that I think is so fascinating is the impact that they have is dependent on where you put that story, where it exists in your talk, where it exists, even the stories that you are telling yourself that hold you back from stepping out front, that actually from doing the thing, telling the story, that you are like, can I really tell this story? Is this a story? Like, ooh, like it takes courage. It really takes courage to tell a story that will move your audience. And
Yes.
so story first is, in some ways, I talk about story first as a theoretical, like, belief system. It's story first. We've got to let stories be more of the driver for us in our content, but also very technically, I want you to start with story before idea. If you watch a lot of speakers, they tend to use stories as the proof. I'm gonna tell you my information. I'm gonna offer all my insights. Here's the things, the ideas that I want you to hold on to. And you're gonna say, as an example, right? And then you go into your story. And the story is proof. You're like, okay, all right. But the powerful idea around a story first concept is, before they even know what your point is, they feel your point. That's
So
what we're going for.
I'm thinking that you're encouraging people to open with a story. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes that's not the right choice, but on the whole, I'd love for people to investigate for themselves. Like, where are my stories? Am I using them as proof, or can they be a curiosity inducer? Can they be the thing that we're, instead of having to pull people back in with the story, we just have them right from moment one? When you start with story, you're easing your way in some really powerful ways. And the science backs it. The storytelling science really, truly backs it. It's so fun to watch and see.
I love the term curiosity inducer.
I just made that up, Jane. I'm
You
gonna
did, like,
write that down.
this moment, you should put it in your.
I guess. I was kind of impressed with honestly, I was like, oh, that's
really good. Because
Yeah.
if you have me curious from hello,
Yeah.
then I'm leaning in.
Yes.
And especially if you're not starting with, oh, it's nice to be in Minneapolis today, thank goodness it stopped snowing, right?
Yeah. We could
How
spend
often,
a lot of time talking about the weather.
yeah, how often, or boy, that was a rousing thing that happened last night. Everybody's probably hungover. That, I think when you launch into a story that may provoke thought, that may induce curiosity, that you are immediately capturing the audience.
Yes.
You're immediately having them say, oh, I'll come along with you.
Yeah. And what's so magical about it to me, Jane, is the people who can hold that space from moment one, you have automatic respect. You are leaning in so hard because you're like, whoa, there's a level of power and leadership. And not that it has to start serious, and not that it's got to be like, hello, it doesn't have to be that, but there is this moment of, I'm going to pull everybody into me, instead of the kind of slow ride in that we tend to take, where it's like, hey, everybody, exactly what you're talking about. We can show appreciation. We can have joy and feel the energy of the room without saying any of that. And when we start with a story, it's like every part of the brain goes, wait, what? I don't know what's going to happen here. Instead of tuning out, because we know generally the chit chat, I call it the chit chat. If it was like all the chit chat, they're not really listening to you because they know it's not that important.
Or they're thinking about their phone or whatever it might be.
It's transition time. She hasn't really started yet. I'm going to just give it a second. And
Yes.
as soon as people tell a story, they're like, oh, it started. Oh, now we're in it.
Now, do
So
you recommend doing anything in the introduction that would, pique the curiosity of the story that you're going to open with?
I
Or
love that. I
I
love
have
that.
never thought about it before.
Yeah, yeah. It's an interesting thing. There's you really I have found that most people don't do intros well. And
Yeah.
so I spend a lot of time training the people who are introing me on how to do intros. Not a lot of time, but that's part of the setup. It's really
Mm.
important.
Yes.
And most of the time, the intro, like you can't depend on it necessarily to
Yeah.
do some of that for you. But
Yes.
I think it's a great idea.
Not too much of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So we've covered moving message and story first. Let's talk next about structure because I really feel like you're going to have something unique and interesting to tell us about, the importance of where you place your stories.
Yeah. And it's not just where you place your stories, but all the places where speaking can fit in your business. And I know we are talking to revenue generating speakers who
Mm-hmm.
are really focused uh, on how to grow that part of their business, earn more money as a speaker. And I applaud that wholeheartedly. That's a big part of what I do and what I'm all about as well. And I think we tend to under recognize all of the speaking, quote unquote, speaking that we do day in and day out, and the ways in which we can serve our audience in the everyday, not just when we're on stage, but what are all of the other ways that we are building up our own authority as a thought leader, as an expert, as a person who doesn't just hold information that they can get for free on the internet at any time,
Mm.
but how are you building that connection into your audience when you're not on stage? What does
Mm.
it look like when you can show up and serve and lead and offer wisdom and insight? So one of the things I talk a lot about is, it's our job as speakers to bring perspective. Like that's what we're being paid for. It is not just we're getting paid for that big wow moment on stage, or you're getting paid for that, deep dive experience, as a speaker, but it's really truly about the way in which you are shaping thinking and shaping the future. And so perspective and stories go together. So it's not just about becoming an awesome storyteller. It's like, how can you in the everyday have what I call story eyes, like just be looking around, seeing them? How do you pull insight from the experiences that you're having, just like you did with the Madonna piece? It's like, this is a point of view piece
Mm.
that is story based. And when we can leverage stories in that way and think about the structure of how we show up to offer that insight, it can be really truly an authority builder that's going to help your speaking business, but also just deepen that connection and as you move your audience.
I love that. So, okay, let's start at the beginning of, say, a cycle with a prospective client.
Yeah.
The email number one that you
Mhm.
send to them might contain some story,
Absolutely.
as can
Absolutely.
email number two and email number three.
Yeah.
Then, if you get a discovery call going with them, perhaps there's some storytelling involved in the communication that you have in selling them on a presentation that might be given by you.
Absolutely.
Then, as you're preparing to go and do the engagement, there might be some story sharing that happens along the way. Maybe there's a story that you talk to the AV team about when you're on site and doing the AV check.
Absolutely.
Maybe there's stories from the presentation that you take into the post meetings where you're talking to them about next steps.
Yep.
So there's opportunities at all of these places when you're sending out a blog post or delivering a podcast for just straight up marketing. Maybe you're telling stories in those.
You show up on social media to help build the credibility and authority of what you're doing. Are you leveraging storytelling in that way? Story plus structure come together and can do really magical things. I love all of that, Jane. I think what the belief underneath that, what we have to sort of open the lid and acknowledge and talk about is there may be some resistance to that. Do we really need storytelling and all this? I don't want to waste people's time. We just like, can I just get right to it? Does it become too much? Do I have any stories to tell? There's a lot of internal trash thinking often sometimes around this stuff. And I think the thing to recognize is when you become a fully dimensional human being sooner and earlier in the process of working with you, right? You're setting yourself up for ongoing retention, referrals, relationship. We're building relationship through storytelling when you think about it from a business perspective.
What is it, Sally, that makes people default to teaching when they're actually on the stage? Why do you think it's just so natural for us to launch into teach?
Well, it's less vulnerable. That's part of it. Storytelling is vulnerable because if you're doing it right, it's personal and you're risking something by opening up and sharing a little bit about who you are. You don't have to share it all. Not everybody gets that, and that's totally fine. Not everybody gets full access to you. And yet, if you want to lead, if you really want to shape perspective, they want to understand who you are, not just what you know, because they can get the information.
Yes.
Everything that you're talking about,
There
they get
is
for free already.
There is no new information was something I heard 30 years ago in the industry, and it's not become any less true now because guess what? There's an AI bot out there who could give the speech that you just gave.
Totally. But the difference is, especially when we embody and allow our authentic voice to be a part of this and share more about who we are through stories, you become a real person for people. And it's not just a flashy title, but it's real deep connection. And that's where you start to move your audience. And it's a different goal than I want to impress the audience. It's a different goal. And you're going to get different things if that is your goal. If you want to impress the audience, you're much less likely to share a story about your failure. You're much less likely to share a story about when things were hard and set yourself up as the hero. But when we say, my goal is to move this audience and know that through a resonant experience together, they're going to come with me, right? They're going to recognize the humanness in my experience and want to walk with me on that.
So the F stories, the failure stories, are something that I think is very endearing to an audience because who can't relate to that? And sure, you could probably be a hero in one of your stories later on, but I think when you open on a failure, it kind of sets the stage for some vulnerability. Let's say somebody did some stuff in their life way, way, way previous. And like, how much do you encourage people to share? Do you put any kind of boundaries around it? We know that we don't want therapy on stage. If you haven't healed from whatever the thing is, then you probably need to wait on it. But what other boundaries can you give for people to say, where should they draw the line?
It's such an important question. And I know you've probably grappled with the concept of we share our scars, not our scabs. I think Brene Brown said that, and I think that's a super helpful way to think about that, right? Like if it's still itchy, and you're still just like, oh, I don't even know what I think about this yet. There's some value in telling it, but that is not for the audience. That's for you. That's for you. And you're not serving your audience in that. So assuming that it is a scar, like it's enough in the past that you have some wisdom from that. Then the question I like to say is the way in which you're telling it, can you tell it in a way so that your audience doesn't worry about you?
Ooh, that's so good.
Yeah, because if they start worrying about you, they are taken out of the story and they're not getting anything from it for themselves. They're just going, oh my gosh, oh no, oh no. So I'm thinking
Mm.
back, Jane, to the story you started with and the general talking about that. You know, he's okay.
He's out. He's not
He's
still
out.
in the cell. And Captain Jerry Coffey made it out alive and went on to live a beautiful life and
Okay.
retired in Hawaii. And
Yeah,
he
good
has
for him.
since passed. But it just, yes, you're not worried about him because you know he made it out because he's
Yeah.
there telling the story.
Yeah. And not to say that emotion isn't welcome in that,
Mhm.
but you've got to be able to manage that emotion in a way that we can feel it with you, but we're not taken out of the story.
Oh, I really love that tip. Not having the audience worry about you. Now, on the polar opposite of that is when people pop up out of the misery too quickly,
Yeah.
right? They don't want to roll around in the muck for too long because it's uncomfortable for them because they
Yes.
it. So they just like boop.
Mhm.
So I was thrown in jail and da 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 da. And then boop, 5 years later, I was out and doing great. You
Right.
don't
Yeah.
know.
You don't buy it, right? You're
Can
just
we
like,
can we can we get a little bit of the misery, please?
yeah.
I want to feel what it felt like to hear the clinking of the bars closing behind you.
Yes. Yeah. What a missed opportunity to bring people into the moment. Right. The moment where we feel with you, like we want to feel with you. We just don't want to
Mhm.
be overwhelmed or, like I said, worry about you in that moment.
Yes.
And I think kind of what you're saying is, and this is one of those like truths about speaking, is it brings up all the things, right, that you haven't dealt with, that the inner work that needs to be done to be able to really show up and allow yourself to be seen. It is hard. So if there was somebody I was working with who was like just moving through that too quickly, right, we're going to slow them down
Put it
and say,
down.
okay, don't rush us through this. We want to be with you in this moment. We need to be able to see it in our heads and feel it. That is the beauty, the persuasive beauty of storytelling, is when we can see it in our heads and when we are feeling it with you. And that is probably that person's like inner work. It might be a skill thing, but most likely it is, like you said, just a anyway, I don't want people to think of me this way anymore.
Yeah.
I don't want to get stuck there. I'm an Enneagram 7, so I'm like totally feel the like, I don't want to get stuck in the negative emotion. But but I'm also a theater person. You know, I grew up on stage. I'm like, oh no, you want to soak that moment. Let us sit here with you for a
Mm. Okay, let's talk about the stage for a second because
yeah.
you are a theater person. I feel we
Mhm.
would be remiss not to discuss how to give me some broad strokes about using all four corners of the
Oh,
stage, your
yes.
power position. Talk a little bit about
Yeah.
that because
Oh,
you theater people really know that stuff way, way more than us non.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I have an interesting background. So I did theater and I have been on stage as an actor for a really long time.
Mm.
I loved it. I loved the feel of the lights. I could always find, you want to find your light. I could just find the hot spot under the light and be like, yay, this is that. Loved it. And I was also coached in high school speech by truly the best coaches in the country.
Mm.
The like National Speech and Debate Association is basically run by them. They are just truly the most skilled people. And I think those are two sides of very two different sides of the same coin, to know the and learn the finesse and the polish of speaking, but also have the experience of what is it like to really embody the stage and do it in a way that is grounded in your way of being, your voice, the authentic way that you move through the space. And they're different enough that it took me a while to kind of let go of the finesse and the exactness, the precision of move here then, and gesture like this, the things that are ultimately they're great for high school speech, but not for connecting with your audience, moving
Right.
your audience, and really also feeling the sense of freedom that we feel when we are in the moment on stage
Mm.
and being intentional with how we move. So finding that balance has been the work of, that's becoming a professional speaker. Like, how can we be precise and polished and professional and present and free? Like,
Mm.
oh, that's what we were going for.
There's a term in the bones that it's a coaching term actually, but you want to have your plans so and your stories so in your bones
Yeah.
that you can be there in the moment and not worry and be thinking in your head of where am I going next.
Yeah. You know it so well, you can
Know it
scrap it.
so well. And that's a case as I'm sure you encourage all of your clients to do is for rehearsal.
Yeah.
Make sure that you have it in your bones because it actually gives you freedom.
Yeah.
And I've seen TED Talks that felt rehearsed, but
Mhm.
not so much in the bones that
Yep.
it didn't feel like I was seeing the
Oh,
rehearsal.
yeah.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yes, yes, yes. They're still in their head. It hasn't really fully gotten into their body yet. I love the book in the
Yes.
bones. I call it integration. Like, what's
Okay.
the difference between memorization and integration? Is
Hmm.
integration, you know it so well that you can scrap the plan and still deliver the needed message. Like,
Yeah.
you can riff, you can improvise based on what is happening in the room, and
Yes.
you've got your key lines down. It is in you, it's in your bones. I think
Mhm.
that is such a beautiful concept. And it takes time to get there. You actually
Really
have to
does.
rehearse. But I also think how you rehearse really matters.
Okay, talk about that.
So it's really, truly not just, I'm going to review this and do the same thing again and again and again. What we have to practice is the stumbling. So I call my rehearsal stumble throughs. Like, we are
Mm.
going to invite in, I want you to get up on your feet before you're ready, before it's comfortable, before it's memorized. I want you to figure it out in your body. Because, as you know, as we talk about like using your authentic voice and body on the stage and really fully using the stage, that comes from self-trust. That comes from being in such a deep place of self-trust that things are not going to go exactly how you planned. And that's okay. You can handle it. You can
Mm.
be present, really truly present in the moment. So you start before you're ready in your rehearsal process. Get up on your feet, embrace the awkward of it all, and it will help you personalize your content faster and get it in the bones faster.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Stumble throughs. That's such a good term. Okay, you have written a book. Your most recent book is called what?
Speaking story. It's all about the persuasive, magical power of stories and how to leverage them, not just as a speaker. This is
Okay.
truly a leadership book in lots of ways, but there are so many goodies in here for speakers because
Okay.
I work with so many speakers. And yes,
Awesome. And your website is bemoved.com.
you got it. Yes.
Bemoved.com. Now, is there anything if people wanted to kind of get to know Sally Z,
Yeah.
what's the best first step?
Well, I think grabbing the book is an
Okay.
awesome first step
Awesome.
in getting to know me, my voice, my approach, and also hopefully really garnering some of this extra magical juice around storytelling, because I know it's important. but what are the things we can do to really up level it to
Mm.
more deeply impact and move our audience? So you can find it over on my website at bemoved.com.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today, Sally. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you. And I am sure our paths will be crossing again in the very soon future.
I hope so, because it's been a long time wish of mine to meet Jane, to meet your people, to be here. I just have so much respect and admiration for what you do and how you do it. And it's been such a delight to be on here. Thank you.
Oh, beautiful. And if you're tuning in, hey, let us know what you thought. Reach out, jane@speakerlauncher.com. I would love to hear some feedback. And with that, we're going to say, see you soon, wealthy speakers. Bye for now, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. If you need help building the speaking business of your dreams, head over to wealthyspeakerschool.com and take advantage of our 20-minute next step call. Thanks for listening to the Wealthy Speaker Podcast.